We'll start our cinematography panel tonight with Gary Baum, Will and Grace for NBC Universal. Gary's been with Will and Grace since the very beginning. He's never missed an episode. Started out as a camera operator. Has been cinematography since they returned a couple of years ago, and is our reigning Emmy champ from last year. He won the Emmy Award last September for Multicam, and that was his second Emmy. He had also won for Mike and Molly back in 2015. 9 nominations overall, with those 2 plus Gary Unmarried, 2 Broke Girls, another one for Mike and Molly, The Millers, and Superior Donuts. So you've been to the Emmys a few times, Gary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about Will and Grace and the return of the show a couple of years ago. Were all of you, what was the reaction to the audience's reaction to the return from the crew and yourself and creators and so forth?
Well, it started sort of not too innocently, but the producers, the creators, are Max Muchnick and Dave Cohen. We did this little 10-minute clip for YouTube about voting, and it created this groundswell, and they decided to all come back and do the show again. So it was like once we got onto the set, it was like no one ever left. It was like someone said, "No, it's like a 12-year hiatus, and we're back." So it was kind of, everybody was the same. All the actors were the same as they were, and was talking about people's kids and life in general.
Well, with the long break and then you taking over as or being the cinematographer for this return, did you want to establish new rules for the way you have cameras set up, the colors, all those kind of things, or did you want to go back to the old rules? What was your philosophy there?
Well, I actually moved up on the show in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
So before we wrapped, I moved, the first go around. So we were using film. I think it was Eastman 500, whatever, and Panaflexes and 11-to-1s. So they wanted the show to look the same, but obviously you can't because we weren't shooting film anymore. We were shooting digital, 1080. So basically, what we had to do was use the same lenses, actually, that we did, the same 11-to-1s to kind of keep that same cinematic feel. And we're using f/55 cameras now, which are larger sensor than 2/3. So it looks the same, but it doesn't. So,
Well, you're also in high def too, which you weren't back when you were
exactly
before.
They wanted to make it look more like film. So I was telling you earlier that we were detuning the lenses a little bit, and I just kind of tweaked the filtration very slightly, so we try to make it look like it did in film.
Now, if you get nominated again this summer, your episode, you submit one episode, and the one
Right.
you chose is called Family Trip.
Right.
That's a wild episode. Takes some of the same format that you typically do, but also a lot of things that you don't normally do on the show. Just talk about that episode.
Well,
Describe it first if somebody hasn't seen it.
there was a scene. The story is basically these kids come over that the character Will teaches in school, and they left a bottle of milk there, chocolate milk, and they decided in the fridge it was fresh, and they decided to taste it and drink it, and it was laced with hallucinogen or something. So everybody's tripping, and so there's a lot of visual effects. There's butterflies in the show, and then don't get a chance to get off the stage much. Maybe 2 or 3 episodes a season on Will and Grace. So every time we break that situation is a lot more fun for me. And we went to the back lot and we did some exterior night work outside of theater. And then we did Megan Mullally plays the character Karen on the show. She decides to, she can actually sing, so she decided she was going to belt out a tune. The Man That Got Away from Judy Garland. And
that's how the episode how pretty much ends.
Right. And we were able to, they wanted to do like a little music video of that, for lack of a better word, of that song. So we shot it the day before, and we used one camera, and we had, we did like a 360 around this piano with her, and they incorporated that into the actual show, which I thought was pretty interesting. So
That nightclub set and your cinematography on that is very strong work. That's a whole different dynamic that you don't normally get to do with the shades and the darkness and all of that. Can you describe that a little bit?
right, they wanted to make it a cabaret style look, and they just said, "Well, do what you want to do." I said, "Okay." So everything we just did it single camera style, which is different than what we normally do. So I was able to go places where the show wouldn't go normally, as far as the depth of darkness and the depth of camera angles and camera movement. So that was a lot of fun for us to do.
You talked about going outside on this episode some, and you don't get to do that very often. What's a work week like and a day like when you've got some outside stuff in addition to shooting the inside stuff?
Well, normally the shows are a 5-day show, which is basically 3 days of rehearsal and 2 camera days, which is basically a block and shoot, and then we shoot again in front of an audience on show night. So what we had to do is break off our normal block and shoot day. On Will and Grace, actually, we don't really shoot much prior to the show because they want to keep it fresh and live for the audience, because multi-camera situation comedies, it's like a theater. So they like to keep it fresh, so there's a lot of audience participation, and the actors really feed off that energy from the audience. So we had to split off earlier in the day and wait for night to shoot. And then we prepped that earlier in the week.
And you mentioned the visual effects in this one. You don't often get to work with visual effects on this show. It's the acting and the
Right.
and the pretty much the 21-minute script with the 4 of them.
Right.
Can you talk just a little bit about incorporating that? You had the butterfly shots.
Right.
You had the where Sean Hayes is drawing in the air.
Right.
How that impacts you and your job.
For us, basically, we didn't use any blue green screen. They basically just have to keep the camera steady for the visual effects guys to, put their magic in, and we just had to figure out where they were going to be and where these butterflies and where they're going to do all their little effects. So it's just a little more of nuts and bolts as far as keeping tabs of lens sizes and heights of cameras and that kind of thing. So.
I want to ask you about your boss, one of your bosses, James Burrows.
Right.
I think he might be the best director that's ever existed, and at least for multicam comedies on television. TV Hall of Famer, goes back to, I think he got his start under James L. Brooks, working like just watching and learning on Bob Newhart show, and of course he did Taxi and Cheers, most of the Cheers episodes. He's done every single Will and Grace episode.
Right.
What's he like as a boss?
No, he's great. He doesn't say much except when he lets us do what we want to do, actually. And the only time you really hear from him if he throws out a snide remark or something. But that's the way he is. He's just a man of few words to the crew, but he knows where we're at with him, and all he has to do is just point or.
Well, what is his genius? Why is he so good?
Because he doesn't get bogged down with minutia. He listens to the dialogue, and he'll be able to fix something on the fly. Where, like, for instance, we had a scene where Sean Hayes, who plays Jack, was going to do something a little bit with a prop, and he said, "No, do it after the line, because you want to get the joke, you want to get the line out, and you want to get the laugh." Those just little genius things like that most people wouldn't pick up on, but he's so in tune to the dialogue and the theater aspect of multi-camera that most people don't really grasp sometimes. He won't even look at the monitors sometimes. He'll just he'll basically trust his operators to get the shots that he wants, and he'll just listen to the dialogue mostly.
He knows the rhythms.
Right, and that's what he's after. He's after the rhythm of the dialogue and the comedy.
We had all 4 of the actors on with us for different interviews last year, and I think it was Megan Mullally said, and this was all the years, not just recently, said she would be amazed. She'd look over sometimes, and he'd walk over to a camera and move it 1/4 of an inch.
Oh yeah.
Because he thought they needed that much movement just to make it perfect.
Yeah, he'll do that. He'll see something, and the operators will react because everybody keeps loose. But sometimes he'll just kick the dolly over and go over there and get that. He'll just point. Because somebody's doing something different. So that's where the genius is capturing that and not doing everything repetitively. So he'll be able to move each camera around and get what he wants without taking 12 takes to do a scene.
Well, we've said James Burrows and Genius like 6 times now, so you'll have to make sure he gets a link to this video.
Oh yeah, he'll like it
for your
too.
next salary negotiation.
Right.
Tell us one last thing as we wrap up your section, your individual section. Winning the Emmy last year, you'd won one before, but to be for Will and Grace, which you've been on all these years, what was the moment like, and how was that special to you?
It was emotional. I didn't realize that it would be that way, but it was something that I got moved up on that show to director of photography, and Jimmy helped me move me up, and my mentor, who just passed away, actually was Tony Askins, ASC, and they were more happy for me than I was for myself, which is kind of weird. They were just couldn't believe, they were just happy, So it was very.
When you got back to set for the next episode, was there a big celebration?
Yeah, it was kind of cool. Yeah, they kind of just gave me a big hug.
Made a big deal out of it.
Well, yeah, and for about 5 minutes. Yeah, it was good.
I think everybody on that
nice.
show has
Yeah.
plenty of. I mean, not plenty,
Yeah,
but they've got a lot of Emmys themselves.
Yeah, it was nice. They were really were happy for me, and like I said, they were more happy for me than I was for myself, because it was just okay. That's really nice, but it made them happy coming back from the show, and that was the only Emmy they got on the show. So I guess it was special. So
Well, this year might be different, maybe a few more.
maybe we'll see.
Well, thank you, Gary. We'll see you back in a few minutes for the closing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.